One of the strongest speeches ever given on the topic was written by Joseph Smith to the Relief Society sisters in March of 1842, asking for their help in preventing iniquitous characters from carrying their iniquity into effect. He warned the sisters not to be duped by any man claiming to have authority from Joseph or the first presidency or any other presidency of the church, and told them that no such authority ever has, ever can, or ever will be given to any man. And if any man has been guilty of any such thing, let him be treated with utter contempt, and let the curse of God fall on his head, and let him be turned out of society as unworthy of a place among men, and denounced as the blackest and the most unprincipled wretch, and finally let him be damned. He further made it clear that this was to be universally applied to all men, no matter their office or calling, saying, all persons pretending to be authorized by us, or having any permit or sanction from us, are and will be liars and base impostors, and you are authorized to denounce them as such and shun them as the fiery flying serpent, whether they are prophets, seers, or revelators, patriarchs, 12 apostles, elders, priests, mayors, generals, city councilors, aldermen, marshal, police, lord mayor, or the devil. All are alike culpable and shall be damned for such evil practices.
This letter from Joseph Smith to Emma Smith and the Relief Society denounces those in the church who teach and practice polygamy under the guise of having Joseph Smith's authorization, among whom was counselor in the First Presidency John C. Bennett, who was excommunicated the following May. Polygamy skeptics like to quote Joseph Smith's public denials as evidence that Smith didn't secretly teach or practice polygamy. But this one comes with a snag that they sometimes ignore. They avoid this problem by quoting the letter from the Relief Society Minute Book, which excludes a troublesome phrase that appears in the draft of the letter. The draft appears in Willard Richards' handwriting. It is undated, but according to an entry in Joseph Smith's journal, it was composed on the 31st of March, 1842. The draft and the minute book have minor differences, except for one significant phrase. Right before the part previously quoted, stating, and all persons pretending to be authorized by us, the draft reads, unless it be by message delivered to you by our own mouth, by actual revelation and commandment. Similar to the so-called loophole in Jacob 2, verse 30, this exception clause implied that it was possible to have authorized polygamy. It was likely removed because it was too revealing and incriminating. Polygamy deniers who want to escape the implications of this phrase assert that Richards later forged the letter to plant evidence implicating Joseph Smith in polygamy.
Yeah. The March 1842 letter to the Relief Society is signed by Brigham Young.
Right, that's right.
We don't have the original letter.
Yes,
they try to fake and pretend that we do, but they don't. We don't. We have what is recorded. The original is recorded in the record book of the Relief Society, and then a fourth version was made, which you know because it does not have Joseph's or Brigham's signatures. It's in Willard Richards' handwriting.
And Willard Richards' version has that silly line at it saying, unless
we tell you.
Right.
We tell you.
Right.
Which is the whole reason he had to make up a fake version, because it's just like the journal entry, just like the Harrison Sagers sermon that Joseph gave, just like all of it, this ongoing record of wink, wink, we're adding this little language in that was not in the originals ever.
Following Stone's lead, polygamy skeptic Clark Abood made this statement.
And so this is the first suggestion of polygamy within documents and altar documents here. So I believe this is evidence that they were willing to create false letters. So let me clarify. Yeah, so we have a forged letter in Willard Richards' handwriting, adding in this extra stuff for polygamy, and I believe this is planted evidence against Joseph. So they can't manipulate the Relief Society minute book, so they create a fake letter.
Similar to Stone, Clark asserts that the document shows that Willard Richards and possibly Brigham Young were willing to create false letters credited to Joseph Smith and plant evidence. As is typical of conspiracy theories, Contrary evidence is explained away by expanding the theory to include it. This is sometimes called an ad hoc hypothesis, created solely to evade unfavorable evidence. An ad hoc hypothesis is a hypothesis added to a theory to prevent it from being refuted. It's essentially a last ditch effort to save a theory from being falsified by new evidence or anomalies. Ad hoc hypotheses are often characterized by a lack of independent support and are introduced specifically to account for a particular anomaly or evidence that threatens the theory. Never mind that the forgery theory has nothing to support it. Worse, Stone and Clark can't explain where this evidence was planted or why it was never used. It doesn't even appear in the manuscript history of the church. A detailed analysis indicates that Willard Richards' copy is an early draft. First, it is undated. Second, it concludes with the names of Joseph Smith and Brigham Young, whereas the copy in the Minute Book has the additional signatures of church leaders Hiram Smith, Heber C. Kimball, Willard Richards, and Vincent Knight. Third, the handwriting is rushed and uses abbreviations. Fourth, there are crossouts and insertions which get incorporated into the text of the Minute Book copy. This is consistent with what one would expect when comparing a draft letter against a final copy. There are 25 variant readings, but let me show you a few important ones. Here's an image from page 3 of the draft, just below the added phrase about the possibility of authorized polygamy. A transcript is provided for easy reading. Below this is the Minute Book for comparison. We can see that the first emendation at the top has fly from canceled and shun inserted above it. Then in the Minute Book below, we see shun has been incorporated in the text. And that's what we would expect to see in the final copy. It is important to keep in mind that we are comparing the draft and the Minute Book, since we do not have the second draft that was sent to the Relief Society. So these changes were probably incorporated there as well, along with other minor changes. Next is the list of civil, military, and ecclesiastical officers who might take advantage of the women of the Relief Society. They first listed church offices and then wrote, or whatnot. This was canceled to add military officers, followed by, or whatnot. This was again canceled to add civil officers. This editing was incorporated when it was copied into the Minute Book, along with changes to make them plural. Finally, yourself was canceled and yourselves written on the line immediately after it. The same for here and adhere, which was possibly a hearing mistake. These emendations were probably incorporated into the text when copied into the second draft and then into the Minute Book. Near the end of the letter, two short paragraphs are reversed. The top image is from the draft letter, and the bottom image is from the Minute Book, showing the two paragraphs have been reversed. Finally, these images show the added names at the end of the document. This is what you would expect for an early draft. It is abundantly clear that Richard's draft came before the Minute Book, not after, as Stone and her colleagues have asserted. This means the phrase in question, unless it be by message delivered to you by our own mouth, by actual revelation and commandment, was deleted from the final copy, not added to create evidence. This has serious implications for the polygamy skeptic narrative. The exception clause in the draft implies that there was an authorized version of polygamy and that unnamed individuals were attempting to practice polygamy without authorization. The exception clause was no doubt removed before Hiram Smith, who was zealous in opposition to polygamy and would not accept it for another year, signed it. Of the 6 signers, only Joseph Smith and possibly Heber C. Kimball were polygamists. At this time, Joseph Smith had 10 wives, not counting Fanny Alger. Brigham Young married his first plural wife in June, Vincent Knight in July, and Willard Richards in January 1843. It would be absurd to suggest that Richards forged the document to look like a first draft by adding the variant readings, thus making this alleged forgery indistinguishable from a first draft. This, too, would be an untestable ad hoc hypothesis designed solely to escape adverse evidence and save the main theory from disconfirmation. The evidence clearly indicates that Richards was not attempting to falsify documents, but was instead meticulously preparing drafts for eventual inclusion in official records. Given the historical context, the letter's emphasis on secrecy reflects the precarious position in which Joseph Smith found himself in Nauvoo. On page 2, they state, "We do not mention their names, not knowing but what there are some among you who are not sufficiently skilled in masonry as to keep a secret." And at the end, they admonish, "Let this epistle be had as a private matter in your society, and then we shall learn whether you are good masons." The letter's mention of masonry and secrecy underscored the need for discretion. Joseph Smith well understood the risks of revealing controversial doctrines too soon, particularly in a setting where public opinion could impact the community's survival. In conclusion, the analysis of Richard's draft letter offers insight into the early church's efforts to navigate controversy and maintain cohesion amidst external and internal challenges. The deliberate omission and the evolution of the letter's contents highlight Joseph Smith's strategic approach in addressing sensitive issues while safeguarding the community's stability, reputation, and survival. I'm Dan Vogel. Thanks for watching.